to our. Oh, there we go. Now we're live. I'll catch up to myself. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to our Facebook Live. Thank you for those signing in. We're glad to have you here on the call today. I'm Wesley, and then we've got Amy from an operational point of view. We thought a good topic to talk about today with you guys is goals and setting a cadence around reaching those goals, making sure that we're accountable on those goals. And then I think one of the important things is knowing which are annual goals and which are quarterly goals. And I think there's a big distinction between those two. So I mean, in your view, which one supports which, and which one is the more maneuverable one of the two?
So I actually think it extends beyond that. I think that you have to set your long-term goals first, whether that's a 5-year or 10-year, if you want to do both, or if you want to do like a 3-year or something like that. You set, which to me, a long-term goal is in direct correlation to your vision, right? So what your vision is, and then make it tangible and actionable in that. And then work backwards from there. So once you have the long-term goal, what can you do over the next year that's going to get you to the 3-year goal, that's going to get you to the 5-year goal, and stuff like that. And then it's just kind of breaking it down. So you break it down from the year, what goals do you have in the year, to what can you execute over the next quarter to get you to that goal. And even farther from that, like once you have your quarterly goals, what milestones are you going to meet to get to your quarterly goal? What daily drivers or actions are you going to do to get you to that? It becomes a pattern of execution and just breaking it all the way down.
So, correct me if I'm paraphrasing this incorrectly. A lot of people say, hey, this is what I want to achieve this year. And then they go balls to the wall, hard focus, say, hey, this is what I want to achieve this year. Halfway through the year, like we're experiencing now, there's a shift in the market. And most often we see people kind of abandon the mission and they adopt survival as the new strategy. And I think, helping people articulate the difference between the vision and the strategy will help people set goals in correlation to those. So the vision is to grow the business. The vision is to have 10 or 15 or 20% growth year over year. The strategy is what changes. But oftentimes we've seen people adapt the vision to say, hey, you know what? Let's change what we do. Let's change this. Let's change that. It's the execution and the strategic approach in pursuit of the vision that's going to get you there. It's not abandoning the vision, it's just abandoning the tactics. If you look at military or you look at sports, and I know you're a big college football fan, so what they do in the first quarter might not be the same plays that they run in the fourth quarter. When they 8-3 down, it's a different strategy to say, we just need those last 2 yards, because that's what's going to keep us in play for the next play, as opposed to saying, let's abandon the strategy. And how do we in business develop a cadence or a discipline around those things?
So one of the things that I have been thinking about is I think it's harder for people to put goals in some sort of perspective in the business realm. But the reality is, if you can successfully execute goals in your personal life, you can successfully execute goals in your business life, and vice versa. If you can't successfully execute goals in those terms, to your point, the strategy of execution and getting to the goals and executing the goals, it's the same whether the goal is, I want my business to grow 50%, or whether it's I want to go to the gym every day this week. The way that you approach them and execute them is the same. So I think that sometimes business goals can be daunting because they seem bigger, And also you have to think business goals aren't directly correlated to you, right? It's correlated to you pulling your weight and me pulling my weight, and the growth division pulling their weight and the marketing division pulling, like it's correlated to the entire team also reaching their goals. And so it's everybody has to execute. And that's where, to me, the building the way you execute, building the check-ins, building the accountability, building all of those things into the strategy is what ultimately gets you to that goal.
Yeah,
If that makes sense.
Yeah. Perfect. So, the of Q3, and this present conversation is, what, we had a decision at the beginning. You're on. So we the year.
Hold on. Leslie, I think your microphone is doing something funky.
Can you hear?
Do you hear what's happening?
Let me give it.
And while Leslie's figuring that out, welcome to Dirk.
Hello.
There we go.
Are we live?
How's it doing?
You're live. We've been going without you.
Are you broadcasting to all the usual places?
We are.
All right. Well, I just finished up our Pivot Ready Teams call. And as you guys know, we're talking about ceilings of achievement. How do you break through to the next level of success in multiple areas of your life? And really, really great call. I mean, it's we ran a little bit long, but I appreciate you guys kicking this off. So what are you guys talking about?
Well, we were just talking about goals, tying your goals to your annual vision, your quarterly vision, how to develop, discipline and cadence around those to make sure that you execute. And then I was mid thought as you jumped in. So one of the things is, I was talking to somebody last week and they said, "Hey, we had these plans for this year. We're not going to hit the goals. So should we just abandon the rest of the year and do a retake for next year?" And if the vision is there, the activity needs to change and the goals are affected. So you know what, we maybe didn't hit our goals in Q1 or Q2, but this is what happened needs to happen in Q3 and Q4. The vision is, if you're just working on an annual vision, this is my vision for the quarter, this is my vision for the year, and you don't have a vision further than that, you need to be able to say, how do I go further ahead of myself? Okay, maybe I didn't make it in the first half of the first year, but it's still a 3-year plan. So instead of saying abandon the vision, you say, let's do laying some track. Let's set ourselves up for a success, for a better launch going into, the next year. So that for us, and I mean, I were talking about the need for accountability, structure, cadence, having responsible leaders owning the responsibility and the execution. So that kind of brings you back up to speed.
Yeah. Am I unmuted? Is my mic even feedback?
Yes, it was.
Okay. Sorry about that. Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing when it comes to goals is that I'm always a firm believer that goals is a derivative of vision, and that first and foremost you have to have a clear and compelling vision for your life and for your business, right? If I'm a business owner and I'm going in to do business and I don't have a clear and compelling vision, not just for the business but for my life, then I'm probably not going to set really good goals. And I've worked with enough people now. I think it was probably like 2014 when I really started actually coaching people. So I've been coaching people for a while now. and have worked with a lot of different people, right? From people starting up businesses to people building $1 million businesses, and now we've got clients that are doing $60 million a year in business, right? So we work with a lot of people, and one thing I've seen is that the people that tend to have the highest level of drive and focus and just willingness to really go after their goals are the ones that have the most compelling visions. And the people that set goals without actually really having anything compelling or something meaningful behind that are the ones that abandon their goals the quickest. So, if somebody says, "Oh, my goal is to do $1 million this year in my business," then it's kind of like, okay, well, what's important about you doing $1 million a year? Well, I just wanted to do $1 million, right? I could really quickly say, like, okay, that person's not going to hit that goal. And when I used to coach real estate agents, one of the things that I would do is to say, well, hey, how much money do you want to make this year? Like, we're doing their annual business planning, or next year, how much money you want to make in the next year? And somebody would say, oh, I want to make $100,000 as a real estate agent. I'm like, oh, cool, okay. Well, what would happen if you made 90,000? And they would say, well, yeah, I mean, like 90 would be awesome. And I'd say, well, what if you made only 80? And they'd say, well, I'd really like to make at least 90, but I mean, yeah, I would probably be okay with 80. And then I'd say, okay, well, what would happen if you made $70,000? And they'd say, man, I mean, 70 would that would be like really tough. Like, I mean, but yeah, I mean, like I could probably make 70. And I'd say, well, what about 60? And they're like, no, I mean, I can't make 60. I'd say, okay, well, what about 65? And they're like, look, if I made 65, like, I'm going to be pretty disappointed this year, but like, that's the lowest I can make. And I would look at them and say, like, you're not going to make a dime more than 65,000. Why? Because in their mind, that's the goal that they're actually willing to accept. That's the standard that they're willing to accept. And I think people that have really compelling goals for their lives, they just kind of get to this place where their standard of what the goal represents is non-negotiable. Meaning that I will show up and we will do what we need to do day in and day out to hit this goal, because it's a standard. It's not negotiable for us to hit this goal. Like, we're going to hit this goal no matter what. And I think ultimately, like, that's the difference between people that actually really move their lives forward, that build great businesses, that build great teams, and all the way from that spectrum all the way to average to below average, right? I think the ones that don't really do much are the ones that are most negotiable with their goals. Like, they're just okay if like their goals don't happen. And I think that's where it comes from, is that you got to be committed to them happening.
I think too, that's a really good point. And back to kind of what you were asking about, Wesley, a goal is a goal. Like, we're driving towards this goal. And yes, the markets can shift, the economy can change, any number of things can happen. We can lose employees, we can gain employees, everything's going to shift, but we're still driving towards the goal. And that is why quarterly goals are a good idea, because you can change. Okay, you kind of reevaluate. We've made it through this quarter, we reached our quarterly goal. What does it take now from where we are today to continue to get us to the yearly goal? And then annually, you kind of reevaluate, like, is my 5-year goal still where we're going? Is it still accurate? Is it still, in line with the vision and all of those things? And so breaking them down creates a cadence of reanalyzing, kind of regrouping, but keeping driven to the goal. The goal doesn't change. And that's what's going to keep you on task, and it's going to keep you moving throughout those shorter terms as well.
So from my side, I see the goal in support of the vision, as Dirk was saying. Sometimes if you don't hit a goal, the goal was there in pursuit of the vision. But what I've seen, speaking to business owners, they abandon the vision because they didn't hit the goal. And I think a lot of times that's where business owners find themselves in a reset mode. It's like, well, we didn't hit our goal. Let's abandon the vision. Let's adopt a new vision. Let's change the vision. And you might be able to adjust the strategy, but if your vision is held hostage by a single goal, and you can't say, hey, I need to regroup, I need to find another way, I still need to be in pursuit of this vision, then you're always going to be beholden to the activity associated with the goal, as opposed to saying, I'm true to the vision.
Yeah, I think obviously, I mean, visions do change, right? I mean, it just things change, perspective changes. I mean, you could be gung ho about building a business, and then you want to sell the business. I mean, whatever the case may be, right? So that does change. But again, I think one of the things that's important is to if things do change, that you do, you know, talk about it, you make it known, you work through it. Because I think one of the worst things to do is the vision changes and you don't talk about it, you don't let anybody know, and then you kind of just start veering off into left field, and nobody really knows why are we veering off into left field, right? It's like, you know, I think like that's one thing for me. It's and I think you guys know, it's like, you know, if something changes in my thinking, I'm very, very vocal about it. I mean, I'll let you guys know very, very quickly, like, hey, this has changed. I'm not committed to this anymore. Like, we gotta, and you know, sometimes the good thing too is that, you know, there's sometimes where I have a swing like that, and like this morning was a good example where, you know, for Mariners Adventure Park, we had, you know, kind of a team meeting, and I laid out this vision about 2 months ago of like, hey, we're going to stop doing this. We're going to focus on this and this and this. And this morning I'm coming back and be like, oh, should we go back to this and this and this? And Amy's like, no, like you said, like we're done with this. And I was like, you're right. Thank you for reminding me. You know, and I said, hey, well, that just means we got to put more pressure on the activities that are going to drive these goals to get us where we need to be in these areas, right? So I think it's you know, that's why it's such a powerful thing that, you know, when you have a vision, you set the goal. You know, for me, one of the important things is that you have to believe that the goal is attainable. Like you got to believe that you can do that thing, and that, you know, we're going to do that thing. And the way that you speak about it is really important, because, you know, one of our clients yesterday, you know, I was coaching him, and they're about $3.5 million in business. They got a great business, and they have the potential to probably go to $10 million within like 3 years. Like, I mean, they're sitting on a powder keg right now. I mean, like they could explode in growth. And some weeks he's really excited about it, and he's like, hey, we're going to do this thing. And then some weeks it's just kind of really off, and he's like, man, we should just maybe maintain. And, you know, yesterday was kind of an on day again, like, hey, we want to do this thing. And I just said, dude, you got to believe it. You got to believe it. And you got to start talking about it. Because he said, you know, sometimes he's like, I don't know if I want to kind of present some of the stuff to our team, because, you know, we've talked about this before, and they may not want to, you know, believe it, or, you know, that it's possible. And I said, you have to believe it. Right now, you're not showing up and you're not talking about it in a way that you truly believe that it's possible, you know? So I think that's the one thing, is that you have to believe it, and then you got to go after it. You got to commit to the activity. And, you know, to the point that you guys are talking about, is like, look, all of a sudden we're in a recession, the market's shifting, things are changing. So it may not be possible for us to hit our goal this year, right? And I mean, there's a lot of businesses right now that their 2022 is definitely not turning out the way that they thought it would. I mean, and week by week right now, it's actually slowing down. It's going the opposite direction, but it's not something that you give up on the bigger goal. It's just like, look, there's a shift. I think it's usually about like 13% of the time we're in a recessionary market. You know, this 87% of the time we're in kind of a, you know, bull market, a growing market. So it's one of these things that, like Wesley said, if you're committed to the 5-year goal, we're still going to figure out how do we get to that 5-year goal, even if we have to pivot right now and we have to do things a little bit different over the next 6 months, 9 months, 1 year.
So I think switching a little bit from goals to actual execution of the goals, Dirk, you were talking about believing in the goal. I think clarity around the goal is also really important, especially when you're talking at a company level, whether the goal is company-wide or whether it's like a smaller divisional goal or whatever that looks like. But like clarity, making it specific, making it measurable, all of the SMART acronym to say, okay, we all are on the same page. We all know what the end result needs to be. And then also we all know what our role is in getting to that end result. And putting in the deadlines and putting in the accountability and putting in the check-ins and things like that, I think the execution of the goal is oftentimes just as important, if not more important, than the actual goal as well.
Well, I think, the way that I think about this when it's done correctly, right, is that the goal is just a target, and the target is there to help us understand what the daily level of activity and commitment needs to be. That's it. Because it's like this: if I set an average goal, then I can have an average level of activity and commitment every day. If I set, a kind of a beyond average goal, then I got to raise that. If I set like an exceptional goal, all that does is it changes how I need to show up today, right? And that's where a lot of people say, look, I mean, if you set a goal, immediately double it, and build your activity around the doubled goal, and then you'll probably hit the original goal. Because a lot of times we always underestimate how much effort, time, energy, money, all that stuff is going to take to actually hit the goal. And that's why I think so few people actually really nail the goals in their lives. Because I mean, think about this. I mean, just even in our personal lives, like how many goals have you set in the last like 3 or 4 years that you didn't hit? I think we do it all the time. It's like we set a goal, we maybe don't hit it, we get to a certain point. I mean, maybe we do hit it, but I think it's the process of learning how to set a goal and then raising the activity level to meet the goal. Because I think, the way it was taught to me is that, look, there's kind of two kinds of people. There's people that set a goal and then the activity level is lower. So then they lower the goal down to meet the activity level. Or there's the other kind of people that they set the goal, they have activity, they're off goal. And then what they do is they don't touch the goal. They come back and they adjust the activity level to go meet the goal. And that's hard because typically what happens is there's a transformation in the human, in the person, on the way to achieving the bigger goal. If you really set a big goal for your life, for your business, it's not about hitting that goal. It's about who you become along the way of hitting the goal. Because you're going to have to think differently. You're going to have to show up differently. You're probably in business. You're going to have to become a better leader, a better visionary, a better strategist. You're going to have to understand so many things at a deeper level. There's just a lot of learning. And it's the learning and it's the person that you become along the journey that ultimately reaches the goal. So absolutely, I think that you're 100% right that it's not, the goal is there just as a marker. That and because that marker is there, it tells us how we're showing up today, and then how I show up today and tomorrow and the next day, that puts me on the path to getting to X, whatever X is, right? And maybe X is the goal or X isn't the goal, but if I want to hit the goal, I have to raise my level of activity daily, and that means I have to get better daily. And I think that's really what the journey is about.
Sorry. I made a Facebook post earlier today. It's by Gail Hyatt that says people lose their way when they lose their why. And I think oftentimes, people are it's easy for them to abandon the goal or to abandon the mission because they don't really have buy-in to the why. Why am I doing this? Why am I going through this hardship? Why am I building a new business? Why am I scaling my $3.5 million business to a $10 million business? Because I don't think people take the time to have conversations and articulate what is important to them and why it's important to them. So therefore, it's easy to abandon anything, personal goals, New Year's resolutions, doing your 60 push-ups a day, whatever it is. If you're just doing it as an activity and it's not tied to a why, then it's not anchored in anything. It just becomes a task. And if it's just a task, I can switch it out for anything else. So maybe let's talk about the importance of connecting or establishing the why when you have goals, because people oftentimes set goals and then because they don't lift their head, they just say, well, I just need to do this one thing to get me from A to B. And not having a why to go back to say, you know what, I'm actually going down the wrong path. And you're not just stubborn about it. You're actually looking at what the market is doing because you're going back to your why.
Well, I think it's, David Osborne talks about this a lot, and he talks about ground game and air game, right? And ground game is when your head's down, like doing the thing, but air game is what gives you your direction. And, it's kind of like this. It's, Wesley, you and I are from South Africa, and like, where I grew up in the heartland, I guess, of South Africa, in the Orange Free State, in the Bethlehem region. It's like there's these rolling like grasslands, and there's these places where the grass is just like really tall. The analogy for me is like you're on your hands and knees, like down in the grass, like doing work, but every once in a while you got to get up on your feet and get your head above the grass so you can see, am I still heading in the right direction, right? If I want to go to that tree over there, but I'm on my hands and knees down in the grass doing work, then I may run into a rock or a stump or something like that, and I may get off target. But every once in a while, I'm just going to stop and I got to get up and I got to look where I'm going, right? So I think that's where it's important to take time to really evaluate where am I, what's going on, am I going in the right direction? And it's one of those things that there's certain things that I think you may want to adjust more often. And then there's certain things that you don't want to adjust more often. Because, I mean, there's certain things that if you adjust them too often, what happens is you just kind of run around doing a bunch of random stuff and you're not really moving the ball forward, right? And I have a natural tendency for that, right? Because I'm entrepreneurial, I'm curious, I'm creative, I've got ADD, like I want to try new things. I like things that give me energy. So, sometimes it's hard for me to kind of like stay the pace and like keep my head down and do the boring work that drives things forward. And that's the other thing, is that a lot of times, like what really drives success is not sexy. It's not the fun, really energetic work. It's actually the boring, mundane stuff that you just have to do day in and day out and just get it done, even if you don't like it, even if it's boring, even if whatever it is. But it builds success because it's consistent. It's the things that give you momentum, and maybe you can build some creativity on top of that. But I think that there's times that you kind of come up and you really look at it, right? I think for a business, once a year, you really have to kind of take a deep look at like, hey, where did we go this year? Where are we going next year? What's our goal for 3 years from now? What's our goal for 5 years from now? What do we see? What do we need in the team? Do we have the right structure? Do we have the right economic model? I mean, there's a lot of things you have to evaluate, once a year, and then from there, break it down into quarters, and then, in the quarters, break it down monthly, and then you can break it down weekly. So, when you kind of come up at certain levels, then you kind of set the tone for keeping the focus, even when you kind of go back down, to playing ground game, when your head's down doing the work, at least you have these micro kind of markers that are telling you, are we on track or are we not on track? Now, again, somebody may wake up today and just be like, oh my gosh, like, okay, my business is way off from where I thought it was going to be. When we set these goals in December of 2021, we did not, really think that we would be in a recession this deep, by August of this year. So now it's maybe time to say, hey, we gotta kind of have an all hands on deck meeting. We got to talk about where we're at, what changes do we need to make for the next 5 months, going into the end of the year. What do we need to double down on? What do we need to let go of? Whatever the case may be. And then once you kind of make those things, then you got to go back and like play ground game again, and like go back to execution and get things done.
So from a business standpoint and an execution, who is responsible for setting the company goals, the annual goals, and who is involved in those conversations, and how do you approach that, setting the goals and all of that stuff?
Well, I mean, we teach the SOG model, right? Where it's a very simple structure: services, operations, and growth, and then the CEO overseeing those three leaders, right? So really at the core, we're talking about a very simple structure. Company has 4 key leaders that form the executive leadership team. And you can really run this model on a very small team or a very big team, right? It's scalable. So I think the CEO ultimately is in charge of setting the vision for the company. Who are we? Where are we going? 3 years, 5 years. I mean, some people, are very visionary. I mean, like Elon Musk, I think, is looking at, 200 years from now, like what needs to happen for the human race to survive, right? I mean, like that's very, very visionary. Like he's a very big thinker. But I mean, most company owners, I think, they're probably somewhere between 3 to 5 years out. They're kind of seeing something. They're seeing a need. They're solving a problem. They're wanting to do something, and they're like, hey, this is where we're going. And then once that vision is set, and I think that vision really needs to be set by the CEO. Once that vision's set, then the leader needs to get together with the executive leadership team and say, okay, look, these I think are the top level goals for the company this year. Get input from the leaders, and then break those down into divisional goals so that services, operations, and growth have their own targets they need to reach to help the company reach their goal. And that's a little bit of like 4DX, right? Of saying like, hey, how do we break down the WIGs, the wildly important goals, into like smaller WIGs that can be executed? And then I think those divisional leaders need to take charge of those WIGs. They need to take charge of those goals, and they need to execute them. I don't think it's for the CEO to say, hey, look, if you're Amy in operations, needs to be your goal, right? I think if you have the right people, you can share the vision, you can share the top line goal of the company, and they need to be able to formulate, okay, like, well, this is what I need to execute in my division as a leader in this company, and have open conversation about it, right? Now, I think if you have a younger leadership team, and I'm not talking about like just age-wise, but just like in the overall time that team's been together, there may not be a great understanding of what needs to get done. So in some instances, and I mean, Maris is a good example of this, right? I mean, I sent out an email that said, hey, these are some of our core objectives for August, right? Because we've got a lot going on. We've got a very, very young team. I mean, in terms of age and in terms of experience in working together and running businesses. So it's still a very young team overall. So there is a little bit more of like, hey, you know, as a CEO, I got to set more kind of defined targets. But my goal is, by doing that, it's kind of like the team is learning, okay, what's most important? How are we doing things? How are we getting up and running? It's still a new business. I mean, it's still in startup phase. So there's still a lot of messiness, but it's kind of having conversations and doing things in a way where at a certain point, the team can execute a lot of that. It's not then up to me to kind of say, hey, this is what's important this month. It's about the team saying like, hey, here's what's important this month. We got to execute this. We got to measure it. We got to track it. We got to report out on it. And it's a continual process of learning. But I think at the highest level, if the CEO can set the vision and kind of really focus on the top level goals of the organization with the executive leadership team, and then those executive leaders can take that and they can go execute with their people without the CEO having to be involved in that, then you're starting to get on the track of building a true pivot ready team, right? Building a great organization that's not dependent on the owner or the CEO being involved in every single decision, because that's usually where a lot of companies get into trouble, right? I mean, in you would think that like at a certain level, like they just figure it out. But I mean, we work with companies that are $2, $3, $4 million companies, and the owner is still involved in a lot of decision making, or the company's just gotten to the point where the owner's not involved in a lot of decision making, but there's no forward progression. It's just the company's just kind of in a maintenance mode, right? So until that executive leadership team can really take responsibility, learn how to work together, learn how to work with the CEO, right? I mean, like we spend a lot of time on learning, how do we work together? How do we communicate together? And it's one of those things that I mean, it's like as a CEO, I'm not like the greatest CEO. I don't know like what to do all the time and how to do everything and the right answer for everything. It's like I need great people around me to lead me and say like, hey, I think we should make this decision. I think we should go in this direction. You know, I need that. And that's how, you know, I've learned how to build businesses, is just by simply having the best people around me and empowering them and giving them autonomy to do things. And I think for a lot of people, you know, that is the best way to do it, because, you know, I think it's until you realize like you just can't do it all, or you have these control issues where you're just like, I can't let go. Right. Fortunately for me, it's like things started moving too quick in too many directions for me to try to control it all. And finally I was just like, look, I'm just going to step out of the way and let you guys handle things and the other teams, stuff like that. And just say, let me know where I can help. But, you know, I just can't do it all. But I mean, like I've had that tendency in the past to want to take control and step in. And sometimes I think I still do that, but it's a learning process. And I think like that's what it's about. It's the learning process of, do I have the right people? Do we know what the right approach is here? But I think it's very much like kind of set top level objectives, or a top level vision, top level goal, and then let the individual division leaders set the objectives for their division, set the goals, and then figure out what are the right strategies and tactics and everything else.
I think too, it's important to add, like, we are a fully remote team, and when we set our quarterly goals as an executive leadership team, we try very hard to all get into physically the same location. And I mean, it usually we do 2 full days of just setting down and laying them all out. And when we walk away as a divisional leader, like I know what my goals are. I also know what the growth division's goals are and the services division goals, and I know where I need to support them in those, but I don't have to continuously go back and forth with them. I can just, hey, when you're ready for my part, come ask me and we'll be ready to help you. And so it helps to balance the workload and to move the ball strategically on an ongoing basis as well.
Yeah, I was having a conversation with someone earlier today. I think the three divisions in a company become very interdependent. You cannot have just operations functioning really well and then servicing lags, or just having growth function and firing on all cylinders and operations drop the ball. So there is a very much an interdependent relationship between those three divisions. Whether you as an owner occupy that seat, or you have somebody of a high caliber person running that division for you, that there's always, and I think a lot of businesses become unstuck because one person is wearing all three hats. So if you're that business owner and you're still thinking as an operational person, but you're looking at growth from an operational perspective, or you're looking at servicing from a growth perspective, so it does tend to muddy the water a little bit. I think the quicker businesses can silo those functions, they still interdependent, but they operate in their own lane. So Dirk, maybe just to wrap us up as we come up to the end of our time in a couple of minutes, maybe talk about the mindset of the leader needed to run people in this program. If you're going to lead people as a CEO, if you're going to hold them accountable, one of the things TD Jakes preached on this a little while ago. He said the giraffe doesn't worry him with the opinions of turtles. So you can't stoop down to that micromanaging level to say, you know what, I'm also going to get drawn into the weeds. I'm also going to get stuck into the little things. As a leader, you have to have that giraffe mindset where you can look ahead, that air game, as you were talking about it earlier. What needs to happen further down the road? What are the key hires we need to make? What are the strategic decisions we need to make now? Even though the execution on the goal might not be where we want it to be, there's a bigger game at play here.
Well, I think one thing is it's not that you don't go down to the ground level, right? Because I mean, like this is something that David says is you can't play air game 100% of the time, right? There's no such thing. So as a CEO, you still have to play ground game as a CEO, and then I think that you have to help your key leaders also play strong ground game, right? So there's going to be times where the giraffe has to go down to the turtle level and say like, hey man, I'm going to spend some time with you here, and like, even though I'm bending my neck and this is kind of a hard position to be, I'm going to spend some time on the ground with you to help you be more successful in the role that you're doing. And I mean, it's part of like developing that person. So I don't think it's like a black and white, like, oh, you can only be up here. I think it's a fluid thing. And as a great leader, you got to know when do you need to help, which person at which level. Because ultimately, like, that's the thing, right? Is if I want to build a really great company, I have to have the best executive leadership team around me, and then I got to understand how to help them win, because if they can continually take more responsibility and take more ownership in running the business, then as a CEO it frees me up, right? It gives me my time and effort and energy back. Then I can focus more on the top level things for that business, and for me, then it's like, hey, I can go focus on maybe starting another business or something like that. For me, I really kind of enjoy that part of it, right? And I found that, at a certain level, it's better for me to bring somebody else in to actually step up and start taking ownership and start running that business without me being involved in it, right? For that business to really go to the next level. So for me, it really is. It's about, I think that the role of the CEO and the mindset is like, can I find the right three people, right? Can I find the right person for servicing, operations, and growth? And then can I support them and help, move big rocks out of the way for them so that they can be successful, so that they can move forward, and help teach leadership to them and help them develop as a leader so that they can build a great team and they can get things off of their plate, right? Because it's, again, I get stuck sometimes if people can't take things off my plate, right? But then the challenge is, like, you guys can get a lot on your plate, then you can't get it off of your plate, So it's a continual process of hiring people, training them, developing them, and giving them more responsibility, giving them more autonomy, giving them more, room to learn and to grow. And it's just a rinse and repeat of that over and over and over. And you kind of go through these cycles, and the faster you can kind of go through these cycles of that, the faster the company grows, right? I mean, we've had the saying since we started BERGflow that the companies with the best teams will win, and that's it. It's can I build a great team? Not like, can I build the best product? Can I, do this? It's the same kind of thing like with our adventure park. We have the largest adventure park in the state of Texas that we started, and it's like, I've got a vision that we're going to build one of the best adventure parks in the world, not in the world, in the United States, right? But at the end of the day, it's like, I can't do that. We can't do that unless we build a really, really phenomenal team. So really the focus is like, hey, we got to build the best adventure park team in the United States, and then we can build the best adventure park. And it's that kind of mindset. Same thing for BERGflow. It's like, look, as we learn, as we grow, as we develop, as we get better people in, and we learn, we can serve our clients at the highest level. We can do more things. That's how we grow. It's like we focus on building the very best team in BERGflow, and then we can build the best, training consulting company that we can to help service-based companies. And that's really the focus is, I think as a CEO, always looking at who do I need to hire next? What does that look like? And, sometimes you hire people and they don't work out, and it's just like back to the drawing board. It's like, okay, I need to go back and figure out, okay, who do we need? How do we find them? How do we hire them? How do we onboard them, train them, all that kind of stuff? And that same mentality carries through for you guys, right? It's like one of the top priorities has got to be like, hey, look, I got to find the right people, pour into them, and then you're always balancing that with like where the company is, their rate of growth, how many clients you're bringing on, like all that kind of stuff. So it's a little bit of a balancing act, but it's just learning the rhythms of all of that and the seasonality of all of it. And it's that's how I think it's like learning to play the game of business, right? Is learning how to balance all of that.
And autonomy comes with clarity. So if you don't have the clarity, if you don't set the goals, if you're not all on the same page about the direction you're moving, you can't give autonomy to everybody, because otherwise it's like a bunch of ants running in a lot of different directions.
Yeah, clarity is really important. And I mean, like, that's something, that it's so funny. I mean, there's some stuff that it's so easy to get clear on, and then there's other stuff that are just confusing. It's just like, we had one of those conversations this morning. I was like, I don't know. Like, it's confusing. It's confusing to us. It's going to be confusing to our customers, So I do think it's like clarity is really important. And, clarity begets clarity, meaning that you get clear about something and then you figure out you're still unclear about something else. And then you get clear about that and you figure that you're still unclear about something else. So it's just this path of kind of unpacking things and getting clear. And I think like that's the advantage of businesses that have been around for longer, and build great teams. It's they get into these rhythms where they can just accomplish really powerful things in a very short amount of time, because they've built great teams. They've learned how to navigate these cycles and clarity, and kind of going to the next level and learning how to pivot. I think like that's what really helps them go to the next level. So I think that's the game.
Yeah, I was in a conversation with somebody, and I think, getting back to the 3 divisions in the business, a lot of companies, this particular company I was talking to is really struggling with growth. And this person is CEO, this person is also head of operations, head of services, and head of growth. I'm like, okay, well, how do you spend your time? It's like, well, I kind of spend it 10% on CEO, 80% on servicing, and 20% on operations. I'm like, well, firstly, you're spending 110%, of which 0 is on growth. So not owning the responsibility and the tasks associated with the role clearly shows in the numbers. And I think people think, well, it's just part of everything that I do as a CEO. I do a little bit of growth. I do a little bit of operations. It's okay. And, it might have gotten your business to this point, but if you want to get serious about business and go to the next level, is you have to adopt, you have to change your mindset. Romans 12:2 talks about renewing your mind constantly, and you have to be able to renew your mind where you have a different perspective, because otherwise you're just going to yield the same results all the time.
You also have to build in accountability. And if you are the person doing all 4 roles, who are you accountable but to yourself? And that's not really accountability.
Yes. Yes.
So when you set, because ultimately what you're talking about too, Wesley, is if you want to take your business to the next level, that's your goal. Like your goal is to get to the next level, then you have to build in all of the steps that are going to get you there, which is being accountable, having those check-ins, doing the day-to-day actionable steps, and all of those things as well.
Yeah, I mean, New Year's resolutions is probably, the greatest example of that. We all self-manage and set our own New Year's resolutions, and gym memberships skyrocket. You're from the fitness industry; they always skyrocket January, February, and all the not so fit people show up, January, and then February at halves, and then by March you've got a bunch of people paying membership that'll never see the inside of the gym again. So our ability to self-discipline and self-manage, spills over into the business. If you're holding yourself accountable for growth or servicing or this or that, you're always going to go to what's urgent. Well, I need to make sure that I retain this client, so let me put on my servicing hat at the cost of growth. So I think if you're going to take your business to the next level, you have to get people that occupy that seat in the bus.
Yeah, and I think I love what Adriana said on here. It says you want the turtles to eventually become giraffes, right? And I mean, like that's really what it's about. It's about giving people the ability to learn, to grow, to go to the next level in business, and that's really what you're looking for. And I think a lot of this comes down to a lot of businesses don't have good business systems to kind of work within, right? They kind of start something, it's entrepreneurial, they get a service going, they start doing business, and then they just kind of get stuck, and so just this where I want to throw out a quick shout out to Pivot Point. We actually have a Pivot Point coming up this week, a virtual one, Thursday and Friday. So in 2 days, we're doing Pivot Point, and this is where we lay out our whole Pivot Ready Teams program of how to really look at the vision of your company, how to structure your company, what's the right economic model, how do you build great teams, and how do you kind of relook at your business a little bit differently to be able to take it to the next level. And again, like I was thinking about this, like I think our smallest client right now probably does maybe $300,000 or $400,000 a year in revenue, and then our biggest client is going to do 60 million. So I mean, like we really work with a really large range of clients. Most of the companies are going to be probably 2 to 10 million in range. That's kind of the sweet spot, somewhere around there. But it's one of those things. If you want to kind of a look into, okay, how can I think about my business differently? How can I see a model that really works for helping businesses go to the next level, whether I'm still kind of a smaller business getting going, or like, hey, I'm a big business and I want to go to the next level. I want to invite you guys to visit BERGflow.com to check that out. We'll have more live sessions coming up too. And then we also do, private coaching where we work with business owners one-on-one with the CEOs. And then we also do consulting where, we really take a deep dive into people's businesses, work with the CEOs, the executive leadership teams. We actually come in and help implement all of this in businesses. So if any of that sounds interesting to you, reach out to us at BERGflow. I'd say we're a little bit unconventional and, in our approach, and which I kind of love. We find that a lot of not a lot of, like, all the clients we work with resonate with that. We're not really kind of suit and tie type people. We're more like kind of jeans and t-shirt type people. But we run multiple 7-figure companies ourselves, and then we work with companies, so we know what it's like to be in the ditches under the stress and pressure of all of that. And we love working with other people and helping them scale their businesses. So we'd love to chat with you guys, do a consultation with you. You can go to BERGflow.com to find out more about that, or just yeah. Is that the best place, Amy?
Yes, it is.
Go to BERGflow.com. BERGflow.com. There we go. All right, guys. Thank you so much for joining us. Amy, thanks for getting the call up and running. And we'll be back next Tuesday. Do we know what we're talking about next Tuesday?
We don't, but if anybody has any questions or requests or anything like that, they can leave them in the comments and we'll address them for sure.
Cool. Awesome. All right, guys. Well, really appreciate that. And yeah. I'm sure I'll talk to you guys later today, but everybody else, have a great rest of your week, and welcome to August.